Hi everybody. It's just me today. This is our October monthly meeting, and we will be talking about the cultural history of Halloween. A few reminders. First of all, remember to pay your dues. It's $10 for returning new members. Sorry, $5 for returning members. You can contact EK if you have any questions. Her email has been listed in previous emails and previous PowerPoints. We also have a group me. The link is here if you want to click on it, or it's also in previous emails. We just sort of do updates and reminders and things like that. So starting off with a little fun fact, 25% of all the candy sold annually in America is purchased for Halloween. So if you've purchased any Halloween candy recently, just know that you are a part of that statistic. So Halloween really started with Celtic origins about 2,000 years ago in 20 AD. There was this Celtic festival called Samhain. It was celebrated on the night of October 31st, similar to how Halloween is now. They believed that on this night, the worlds of the living and the dead really sort of blurred together. The dead could walk among the living, sort of like how the Day of the Dead is in Latin American cultures. They also celebrated this holiday as a way to end the harvest season and sort of celebrate the transition from harvest season into the winter. So on this night, they ended up causing a lot of trouble. They damaged crops. They had these sacred bonfires with animal sacrifices. I think that was just sort of a celebration and sort of a thanks to anybody that gave them their good harvest. And as a here's something to give us another good harvest kind of thing. On this night, they wore a lot of costumes. They weren't anything fancy. They were just like animal heads and skins. And it was so that they could hide their faces and others wouldn't know if they were living or dead. About 20 years later, the Romans conquered the Celtic territories. And over the next 400 years, these two cultures combined, and two Roman festivals also combined with Samhain. There was one of them called Feralia, which commemorated the passing of the dead in late October. It was sort of just a celebration of their life and thank you to death for not killing them. There was also the holiday of Pomona, which was, Pomona was a Roman goddess. She was the goddess of fruit and trees. And so the holiday was just in honor of her and a thank you for all of the harvest that they had gotten from her, and sort of a please let us have this again. Later on, like a few hundred years later, there was something called All Saints Day. You've probably heard of this. I had heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. It's a Catholic holiday, and it ended up blending later on with Samhain. In 1000 AD, it was celebrated on November 1st, and then the day following, on November 2nd, they celebrated All Souls Day, which was to honor the dead. All Saints Day, though, was to honor the living saints, so like the priests, the Pope, just sort of the higher religious officials in the Catholic religion. They celebrated with these really big bonfires. They had parades. They had costumes where people dressed up as religious figures like angels and saints and devils and sort of things like that. It was also called All Hallows or All Hallowmas, and the night before was called All Hallows Eve, which we now know as Halloween. And some people even now call Halloween All Hallows Eve, which this is why. So in America, Halloween really became popularized whenever the colonists came over. It was really common in places like Maryland and the southern colonies. It was first celebrated with these things called play parties, which was sort of like a Halloween party, a fall festival kind of party. The neighbors would tell ghost stories. They would tell each other fortunes. They would dance. They would sing, general party stuff. As time went on, it sort of evolved into a scary kind of ghost stories, mischief kind of night of, destroying crops, setting things on fire, general mischief activities. But by the mid 1800s, the fall festivals were really common, but the idea of Halloween really wasn't. It was really centered as a mischief night for people to destroy things. And then during the potato famine, whenever the Irish immigrants came over, they really popularized that idea of Halloween as a night for celebration in the second half of the 1800s, because they had been celebrating their Celtic holiday of Samhain for so long. They brought that over to America and sort of intertwined those cultures. These are just some costumes throughout the years. They're a little creepy, but back in the 1930s, the box costumes that we know now that you could get at like a Spirit Halloween or a Walmart or a Party City were really, really, really expensive. So this was also around the time of the Great Depression. You know, people did not have a lot of money in those days. So the majority of the costumes you see in that photo are homemade, which is really impressive. Some of them are very, very impressive. You also see that a lot of these children have their faces covered, and that sort of stems from that tradition of not knowing whether you're living or whether you're dead. Then later on, about 20 years later, box costumes got a lot more popularized. They were a lot more affordable now. They're sort of what you think of now, of that pop culture relevant kind of stuff. And they're cheap, they're not well made, but they look good enough just for one night. Trick-or-treating was really popularized through sort of a combination of two little origins. The treats originated from Americans dressing up in costumes, and they would go from house to house. They would ask for things like food or money, and then this sort of stemmed from a European tradition similar to this, that they also asked for treats like food or money. The tricks, however, came from young women would do these tricks with like yarn or mirrors. I think it was just sort of like light witchcraft, I guess I could say, where they would think that they could find their husbands or the initial of their husband or the name of their husband, or they may even meet him that night if they did these tricks on this night. And then later on, Halloween parties really got popularized, and they sort of cemented that idea of Halloween being a holiday of community and get together rather than the mischief that it was previously known as. This sort of led to Halloween losing a lot of those superstitious and religious overtones that it had previously with Pomona and with All Saints Day. I'm sure you've probably heard of Mischief Night, though. If you haven't, there's probably some form or variation that you've heard of that. That's the day before Halloween, or the night before Halloween, where people just cause general mischief. It's very lighthearted, non-harmful pranks and jokes like TPing or egging or silly string, just really small things, but just a night to cause mischief. And then the next night would be a night of get together and fun and candy. So our current traditions, as I'm sure you're all very familiar with, are trick-or-treating, carving jack-o'-lanterns. I honestly do not know where that originated, but it's pretty cool that we do that now. The fall festivals, which are really common among schools and churches and community groups. We dress up in costumes, and then we also eat a lot of candy, which is my favorite tradition. Halloween is also celebrated all around the world. It, of course, you know, America, it also goes up to Canada, the sort of UK countries of England, various European countries like France and Spain, even though that's not marked, Russia, China, Japan, various Asian countries, and all the way down to Australia and New Zealand. So it's celebrated in various ways, but all sort of pretty similar all around the world. There are some similar holidays and traditions around the world, though. In Latin American countries, there is something called de los Muertos, which is the Day of the Dead. It is a 3-day celebration which begins on October 31st. It's known as a day where the dead return to their homes on earth. They have these altars that the living will have altars that commemorate their deceased family members and just sort of a celebration of their life and reminisce about their lives and how great of a person they were on November 2nd at the end of the celebration. They go to those grave sites and have a big celebration. They'll have a picnic. They light candles throughout the celebration so that the dead can find their way back to their homes. And there's a big just celebration of their lives. If you've ever seen the movie Coco, that is this holiday. If you haven't seen the movie Coco, I highly recommend to go watch it. It's a great movie. Sorry about that. In England, there's something called Guy Fawkes Day. Guy Fawkes was an English trader. He tried to blow up the Parliament building in England. And this day is actually a celebration of his death, his execution. It is celebrated on the evening of November 5th. They have just a big celebration, and they do things like bonfires, they burn effigies, and they have a big fireworks celebration. And then they also have this sort of trick or treat-ish kind of thing that's called Penny for the Guy, where children will go around and they'll ask for a penny for Guy. And they keep the money though. They don't give it to Guy, or they don't give it to anybody who's ever died. They keep the money for themselves. So that's sort of their own treat, and they trick someone into giving them a penny. If you ever want any more information about any of this, this is where I found everything. It was really interesting to learn about, and I highly recommend going into and looking at anything if you're interested in any of it. There's a lot of information out there. It was very interesting to learn. But that's all I have. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next month.